In this busy world, it can be easy to feel the pressure of time. Anxiety about where you are in life and whether you've accomplished enough are common feelings. It's common nowadays to feel old when you've passed 25. And if you haven't achieved some big feat or accomplished something noteworthy by that time, then surely you must have failed as a human being. But how much time do we have in this life, and what does it mean to spend this time well? How do we spend our time wisely so that we end up actually living instead of just existing into old age? I'm not at all immune to these questions, and I often worry about them myself. And that's why I decided to look into this a little bit more. I think it's interesting to note that the average life expectancy worldwide currently is 72.6 years. And if you live in a high income country, it's closer to 80 years actually. But is this a long time? A couple of years ago, I came across a graphic on the internet that captured the entire span of a human life in a single image. And it looks like this. In this large grid of squares, every little square represents 1 week of your life. A single row of squares represents 1 year, and in total there are 80 lines represented here for 80 years worth of a life. So you can start to color these in to represent periods in your life. For example, your early years, from the time you were born to the time that you go to primary school, look a little bit like this. This is the time in which you take your first steps and speak your first words. And similarly, we can do this for other periods in a life. The period from primary school until high school, a very important and influential period, takes up more time, but is still relatively short in the span of a life. And if you go on to college, it may look like this, a bit longer or shorter depending on whether you go to grad school or not. And after college, you will enter the working life, in which you will spend the biggest period of your life. And lastly, if climate change hasn't destroyed the world and social security hasn't completely collapsed, you may enter into retirement, where you will stay until you die. This is what an average life looks like. No matter how old you are, you have a finite, countable number of weeks left to you. So even though you live much longer than most of your ancestors did, an entire life can still be captured in a single diagram. If you wanted to, you could print out an empty version of this diagram and color in a single square for every week that passes. And in life, we have many key moments. This contains your 18th birthday, when you get the right to vote and the right to participate in democracy. You may have gotten a driver's license around that time. And later in life, you may get married. You may get children. Maybe you'll get a new job or a promotion. Or maybe you'll get a divorce. Many things can happen in life, but what does this mean? If life can fit in a single diagram, does that mean it's short? Or is it long? The Roman philosopher Seneca wrote about the shortness of life over 2,000 years ago. And the fact that we still ask this question today tells us it's a difficult one, and it probably doesn't have a singular answer. Still, I think Seneca can provide us some insight. He says, "It is not that we have a short space of time, but that we waste much of it. Life is long enough, and it has been given in sufficiently generous measure to allow the accomplishment of the very greatest things if the whole of it is well invested." Basically, Seneca tells us that our life isn't short, and it doesn't even move quickly. We just don't spend it well. Seneca argues that to waste time is to waste your life itself, because time is all we have, and we never know when it might come to an end. Seneca also offers 2 other pieces of advice. The first one is to stop ruminating on the future and start living in the present. Everyone hustles his life along and is troubled by a longing for the future and a weariness of the present. but the man who organizes every day as though it were his last, neither longs for nor fears the next day. We spend too much time worrying about the future, on planning it, or on looking forward to future events. But the future doesn't exist yet, only the present does. And by living in the future, we waste the present. Seneca has another quote, which follows, "People lose the day in expectation of the night, and the night in fear of the dawn." The future as we see it never arrives. It's always just out of our grasp. The second is more of a warning. Seneca is highly critical of people who waste their lives in anticipation of living at a later stage. You live as if you were destined to live forever. No thought of frailty ever enters your head. Of how much time has already gone by, you take no heed. You squander time as if you drew from a full and abundant supply, though all the while that day which you bestow on some person or thing is perhaps your last. We don't know how much time will be given to us in this life, and once time passes, it doesn't come back. Putting off actually living is the result of the arrogance of men who think they get to live forever. Now, if I had the answer to this question, I wouldn't be making this video. But one thing that has been helpful for me, and that may be helpful to you, is to be mindful of the way you spend your time. One way to do this is to look at the activities you do daily or in a week and see what kind of activities they are. They can be activities that you enjoy in the now, but that don't contribute to your goals, such as watching TikToks, doom scrolling on Twitter, or watching your favorite Netflix show. Other activities may not be enjoyable as you are doing them, but they contribute to improving your future life or the lives of other people. These can be activities such as working on personal growth, exercising, or trying to work towards future goals and realizing your hopes and dreams. But these are often difficult and not always enjoyable in the moment. Eventually, what we would like to have is a balance of the former, which are not bad in themselves. It is totally fine to have some fun on TikTok or to binge watch your Netflix show. But ideally, you would like to have some sort of balance between the two types and maybe even find some activities that improve your life and are fun. However, all of this talk about how to spend your time, I think, can be quite anxiety-inducing. And so I also want to add in a small word of kindness here. I see a lot of self-improvement advice that focuses only on more productivity, more perfectionism. And I think this leads to comparing your own life against everybody else. And I don't want that to be the takeaway here. We all have responsibilities and duties that we can't control that take up some of our time. You may be a student who has to go to class and study for tests and write papers. Or you may have a time-demanding job that you need to pay rent. Or you may have children that are dependent on you. Or you may be caring for elderly family members. If there is no space in your life right now for big changes, that's okay too. It's important to be kind to yourself and realize that life isn't a race. All I would like to offer is an invitation to you to simply look at the way that you spend your time and decide whether you are happy with that, or whether you would like to make some changes. And if now is not the right moment, then you can always come back to this later. We've all experienced time passing by like a high-speed train. It's not going to stop for you or me, so it's important to be mindful of the time you have and spend it well. But be kind to yourself first, and I will try to do the same.